Good evening. Welcome to Kenya News Update today. I'm your host. In a major policy shift with global implications, the Trump administration has announced it will begin proactively revoking the passports of American parents who owe significant child support. This enforcement of a decades-old law is set to begin in the coming weeks, and it could ground thousands of U.S. citizens, including those living abroad. Tonight, we take a deep dive into what this means, how it works, and the fierce debate it has ignited. We'll examine the legal framework, the human impact, and the potential ripple effects for families and international relations. This is a story about money, mobility, and the power of the state to enforce family obligations. Let's begin with the basics. What exactly has changed? For nearly 30 years, since 1996, federal law has technically allowed the government to deny or revoke passports for unpaid child support exceeding $2,500. But in practice, the State Department only acted when someone applied for a new passport or a renewal. That passive approach ends now. In early February 2026, the administration unveiled an expanded, proactive passport denial program. The key shift is this: the State Department will now actively seek out and revoke existing, valid passports based on data from the Health and Human Services Department. They won't wait for you to come to them. If you owe enough, they will find you and cancel your travel document. The initial enforcement phase will target those who owe more than $10,000 in arrears. Officials estimate this could affect tens of thousands of passport holders immediately. But the ultimate goal is to cast a wider net, eventually including those who owe the statutory minimum of $2,500. To understand the scale, consider this: according to the latest federal data, there is over $100 billion in unpaid child support nationwide. That's $100 billion. The government argues this new tool is necessary to compel payment from the most egregious cases, those who have the means to travel internationally, but not, they say, to support their own children. Now, let's look at the mechanics. How does this process actually work? It starts with state child support agencies. When a case goes into arrears, the state can certify it to the Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement. That office then submits the debtor's name to the State Department's Bureau of Consular Affairs. Under the old system, that name would sit in a database, flagged only if the person applied for passport services. Under the new system, the State Department will run that list against its database of all currently valid U.S. passports. When it finds a match for someone owing over $10,000, it will initiate revocation. The passport holder will receive a notice, likely by mail to their last known address, informing them that their passport has been invalidated and must be surrendered. They will be unable to travel internationally. The only way to get a new, valid passport is to pay the debt in full, enter into a formal payment plan, or have the case modified or dismissed in court. For Americans living overseas, this presents a unique crisis. Imagine you're a U.S. citizen working in Nairobi, Dubai, or London. You receive a letter saying your passport is now just a worthless booklet. You cannot legally travel to another country. You cannot board a flight home to the United States. You are, effectively, stranded. Consular officials acknowledge this scenario, but state that individuals in this situation must contact the nearest U.S. embassy or consulate. They may be issued a limited validity passport, good only for direct return to the United States, but only after their case is reviewed and they demonstrate an intent to resolve the debt. It's a logistical and personal nightmare. Proponents of the policy, including many family advocates and state officials, hail it as a long overdue enforcement mechanism. They argue that for too long, wealthy delinquent parents have flouted court orders, hiding assets and enjoying international travel while their children go without. They point to the staggering $100 billion in unpaid support as proof the system is broken. A passport, they say, is a privilege, not a right, and it should be contingent on meeting basic civic and familial responsibilities. They believe the threat of losing travel freedom will be a powerful motivator for payment, ultimately putting more resources into the hands of single parents and children. Critics, however, see a deeply flawed and potentially cruel policy. Legal experts question the constitutionality of effectively imprisoning someone within U.S. borders or stranding them abroad for a civil debt. They argue it violates due process and could be challenged as an excessive punishment. Furthermore, they point out that the policy fails to account for why someone might owe child support. What about the parent who lost their job, faces a medical crisis, or is disputing the paternity or amount of the order? The debt amount alone doesn't tell the story of hardship or injustice. A blanket revocation, they warn, could trap victims of flawed court systems or economic misfortune. There's also a significant racial and economic justice concern. Data shows that child support enforcement disproportionately impacts low-income communities and communities of color. A policy that revokes passports could further entrench poverty by preventing someone from taking an international job opportunity or visiting family support networks abroad. It's a tool that may be wielded most harshly against those already struggling. So, what are the international implications? This policy places U.S. embassies and consulates on the front lines. Diplomats, whose primary role is to assist citizens abroad, will now become de facto debt collectors and enforcement agents. It could strain relations with host countries if large numbers of U.S. citizens become undocumented or stranded, potentially requiring local social services. Other nations may view this as an extreme measure. Could it inspire similar policies globally? Countries like Canada, the UK, and Australia have their own child support enforcement mechanisms, but none are known to use passport revocation as proactively as this new U.S. plan. It sets a precedent that other governments, perhaps even here in Kenya, might consider following. Let's hear from two perspectives. First, a voice in support. We spoke to Maria Gonzalez, a family law attorney in California. She says, "For my clients, single mothers working two jobs, this is justice. They see the other parent posting vacation photos from Bali while they can't afford new school shoes. This policy finally has teeth. It targets a specific group, people who have the means for a passport and international travel, which isn't cheap, but claim they can't pay a few $100s a month for their kid. It's about priorities and accountability." Now, a critical view. David Chen, a civil liberties attorney with the CLU, argues, "This is a dangerous escalation of the carceral state into civil matters. It turns the State Department into a global bounty hunter. The government is creating a class of second-class citizens who cannot leave the country, not for a funeral, not for a business deal, not for anything. It ignores the complex realities of poverty, unemployment, and often unfair family court judgments. The punishment does not fit the crime, and it will hurt children by potentially cutting them off from a parent who could be a positive presence if not for this draconian measure." The debate often centers on two numbers: the $2,500 threshold in the original 1996 law and the new $10,000 benchmark for proactive revocation. The $2,500 figure, set nearly 30 years ago, has not been adjusted for inflation. In today's dollars, that's equivalent to over $5,000. Some policy analysts argue the threshold should be updated to reflect modern economic realities, ensuring the law targets true hardship cases, not those temporarily behind due to a job loss. The $10,000 threshold for the initial crackdown is an administrative choice, not a legal one. It allows the government to start with what it perceives as the most severe cases. But critics ask, is someone who owes $9,999 fundamentally more responsible than someone who owes $10,001? The line is arbitrary and may not reflect ability to pay. Let's visualize the potential scope. According to estimates from the Office of Child Support Enforcement, approximately 55,000 U.S. passport holders currently owe more than $10,000 in child support arrears. That's the initial target pool. But the pool expands dramatically when you consider the original law's threshold. Over 200,000 passport holders are estimated to owe more than the $2,500 minimum. If the program expands as intended, that's 250,000 Americans who could lose their travel rights. For context, the State Department issued over 22 million passports last year alone. So, while the affected group is a small percentage of overall passport holders, it represents a significant number of families and individuals. What happens next? Legal challenges are almost certain. The first lawsuit could be filed the day the first revocation notices go out. The core argument will be whether revoking a passport for unpaid child support constitutes a violation of the constitutional right to international travel, which the Supreme Court has recognized as part of the liberty protected by the Fifth Amendment. The government will counter that the right is not absolute and can be restricted for compelling government interests, like enforcing court orders and supporting children. The outcome is uncertain. In the meantime, the State Department is preparing for operational rollout. Consular officers worldwide are being briefed on the new procedures. A public awareness campaign is expected, urging those who owe child support to contact their state agency to make arrangements before their passport is flagged. For the global audience, including our viewers across Africa and the diaspora, this is a stark reminder of the long arm of U.S. law. A U.S. passport is a powerful document, but it comes with strings attached to domestic obligations, no matter where you live. It also highlights the growing trend of using access to official documents as leverage for policy compliance, a trend seen in other areas like tax collection. As we conclude, this story is more than a policy change. It's about the balance between individual freedom and collective responsibility. It's about how far a government should go to enforce private family agreements. And it's about the unintended consequences that can ripple across borders. Will this policy succeed in collecting billions in unpaid support and providing for children? Or will it create a host of new problems, trapping people in legal and geographical limbo? Only time and likely the courts will tell. For now, the message from Washington is clear: pay what you owe or stay home. Thank you for watching this deep dive. For continued coverage of this and other stories affecting Kenyans at home and abroad, remember to subscribe to Kenya News Update today.